At 14, my parents locked my bedroom door to protect my sister from me. She had a bruise. She said I gave it to her. They believed every word, no questions, no doubt, just silence. Then years later, when they saw me thriving, they came back with open hands, asking for money, but I hadn't forgotten the door that never opened, the cake with only one name, the lies they chose over their daughter. So tell me, if the people who broke you come back wanting something, do you owe them anything but the truth? Before we dive in, drop a comment and tell me, where are you listening from and what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let's begin. The Washington sun beat down mercilessly on our backyard that Saturday afternoon, making the plastic tablecloth stick to everything it touched. I could hear Aunt Debbie's shrill laughter from inside the house as I finished tying my second sneaker, already knowing what I'd find when I stepped outside. The party had started without me, again. Callista stood in the center of our patio in her carefully chosen pink satin dress, the one with the fake pearl belt that Mom had fussed over for weeks. Her curls were pinned just right, creating that effortless look that only our mother could achieve. But it was the cake that made my stomach drop. 3 perfect layers sat in the middle of the picnic table. White and pink frosting swirled like cotton candy dreams. Glittery letters spelled out "Happy Birthday, Callista" in elaborate script. Just Callista, not "Happy Birthday, Twins" or "Callista and Yelena Belova." Just her name, as if I'd never been born on this same day 13 years ago. I paused at the back door, gripping the handle, waiting for someone to notice the oversight. Maybe Dad would laugh and pull out another cake from the kitchen. Maybe Mom would gasp and quickly add my name with leftover frosting. But no one looked my way. No one seemed to care that half of today's birthday girl was missing from the celebration. "Yelena Belova, honey, come get some cake," Aunt Debbie called out, waving a plastic knife in the air. She cut a corner piece, not from the beautiful layers, but from a plain sheet cake hidden on the side table. The frosting was already melting in the heat, and there were no candles, no decorations, just chocolate cake on a paper plate. "Here you go, sugar," she said, pressing the plate into my hands. "Still warm from the oven." I wanted to ask why my name wasn't on the real cake. I wanted to know why I got the leftover dessert while Callista posed for pictures with her 3-layer masterpiece. Instead, I mumbled "thank you" and found an empty spot on the porch swing. Callista was already unwrapping presents, her new camcorder in hand, a gift from Uncle Ray. She pointed it at her growing pile of gifts, practicing her smile like she was rehearsing for television. "Say hi to my birthday vlog," she giggled into the camera. "I'm 13 now." I took a bite of my cake, but the frosting was too sweet, cloying on my tongue. We were both 13, but apparently only one of us was supposed to age today. When Dad walked by with his beer, I stood up carefully. "Dad, why isn't my name on the cake?" He didn't even slow down. "Don't start. Yelena Belova. It's just a cake. Don't make a scene." That phrase again. Every time something wasn't for me, every time I was excluded, I was the one making it uncomfortable. I swallowed the hurt and sat back down, watching my twin sister command the attention of every adult in our backyard. Later, Mom found me picking at the hem of my shorts. "Why are you over here sulking, honey?" "I'm not sulking," I said quietly. She brushed a strand of hair from my forehead with a gentle smile. "You're not really the cake type anyway, are you? You like sports and getting dirty?" She laughed like this was endearing. "You know we love you both." Then she walked away to adjust Callista's tiara. Yes, she was wearing a tiara, leaving me alone with my half-eaten corner of sheet cake. The only person who seemed to notice my absence from the festivities was Grandma Marion. She sat in her usual spot by the sunroom window, watching the chaos outside with knowing eyes. When I passed by her chair, She quietly slipped a crumpled $5 bill into my palm. "Treat yourself sometime, baby," she whispered. It wasn't much, but in that moment, it felt like everything. The newspaper article was small, barely 3 inches in the local sports section, but it featured a photo of me scoring the winning goal for our middle school soccer team. "Local 8th grader shows promise," the headline read. I cut it out carefully and taped it to my bedroom wall, right next to my participation ribbons. For exactly 2 days, I felt special. "Did you see this?" I heard Mom say to Mrs. Patterson from next door. They were standing by the mailbox, and Mom was holding the newspaper. "Our Yelena Belova made the paper." "How wonderful," Mrs. Patterson exclaimed. "You must be so proud." "We are," Mom replied, but her voice carried that careful tone she used when she wasn't entirely sure how she felt about something. Though I do worry about her getting too focused on sports. Callista's more well-rounded. Piano, honor roll, the school play. I stopped listening and went inside, the warmth from the newspaper clipping already fading. That evening at dinner, Callista was unusually quiet. She pushed her mashed potatoes around her plate, stealing glances at me when she thought no one was looking. When Dad mentioned the article, praising my hustle on the field, Callista's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I made honor roll again," she announced suddenly, interrupting Dad mid-sentence. "Of course you did, sweetheart." Mom beamed. "You're so consistent." The conversation shifted back to Callista's academic achievements, and my moment in the spotlight flickered out like a candle in the wind. Over the next few weeks, small things started going wrong. My cleats went missing the morning of an important game. My homework mysteriously disappeared from my backpack. My favorite pen, the lucky one I used for tests, vanished from my desk. "You're getting so forgetful lately," Mom observed when I couldn't find my math textbook for the third time that month. "Maybe you need to be more organized." But I knew I wasn't forgetful. I'd been the organized one since elementary school, the one who reminded Callista about project due dates and permission slips. Something was happening, but I couldn't prove it. The first real incident occurred on a Tuesday after soccer practice. I came home muddy and exhausted, my shin guards caked with grass stains. Callista was sitting at the kitchen counter doing homework, a small bandage wrapped around her index finger. "What happened to your hand?" I asked, dropping my gear by the door. She looked up with wide, innocent eyes. "Oh, this I accidentally scraped it on the bathroom door when you rushed past me this morning. You were in such a hurry." I frowned. "I don't remember rushing past you." "Well, you did," she said with a little shrug. "It's fine. These things happen when people aren't paying attention." Mom looked up from her magazine. "Yelena Belova, you need to be more careful around your sister. She's smaller than you, but I didn't. Just be more aware of your surroundings. Okay?" That night, I lay in our shared bedroom, listening to Callista's steady breathing and replaying the morning in my mind. I remembered being careful, remembered checking to make sure the bathroom was empty before going in, but doubt crept in anyway. Maybe I had been rushing. Maybe I hadn't been paying attention. Maybe this was my fault after all. By the time spring arrived, I had thrown myself into every activity I could manage: soccer, track, volunteer work at the animal shelter, tutoring younger kids, and math. If being well-rounded was what made you worthy of attention in our house, then I was going to be the most well-rounded person in Washington. The strategy backfired spectacularly. "You're never home anymore," Mom complained when I asked permission to join the debate team. "Family time is important. Yelena Belova." "Callista has piano lessons 3 times a week," I pointed out, "and theater rehearsals." "That's different. Those are enriching activities. You're just busy." The distinction stung, But I accepted it. I was busy, and Callista was enriched. I was scattered, and she was focused. I was trying too hard, and she was naturally gifted. The narrative was already written. I was just living it out. Meanwhile, the accidents continued. Callista showed up to breakfast with a bruised shoulder, claiming I'd bumped into her while getting ready for school. She developed a scratch on her arm that she said came from me grabbing her during an argument I didn't remember having. Each incident was minor, easily explained, completely plausible. And each time, our parents' concern for Callista grew a little stronger while their patience with me grew a little thinner. "You've been different lately," Dad said during one of our increasingly rare one-on-one conversations. "More aggressive. Your mother's worried." Aggressive. The word felt foreign in my mouth. "I'm not aggressive, Dad. I'm just trying to keep up." He studied my face for a long moment. "Maybe that's the problem. You don't need to keep up with anyone. You just need to be yourself." But I didn't know who that was anymore. Every version of myself seemed to be wrong somehow. Too loud, too quiet, too focused, too scattered, too much, too little. The lock appeared on our bedroom door on a Thursday in April. I came home from track practice to find it gleaming on the outside of the door we'd shared for 13 years. A small white label was stuck below the handle: "Do not unlock without parental permission." I stood in the hallway for 5 full minutes, staring at that lock, before Mom walked by with a laundry basket. "It's just to make sure Callista feels safe," she said without stopping. "She's been having trouble sleeping." "Safe from what?" I called after her, but she was already down the stairs. That night, I knocked on the bathroom door where Callista was brushing her teeth. She looked at me through the mirror, her expression neutral. "You told them I hurt you," I said quietly. She continued brushing, taking her time with each tooth. When she finally spat into the sink, she turned to face me. "I told them the truth," she said. "You have been hurting me. Maybe not on purpose, but you're intense. You make me nervous. I've never laid a hand on you, Callista, not once." She tilted her head, studying me like I was a puzzle she was trying to solve. "Are you sure about that? You've been so angry lately, so jealous. Sometimes I think you don't even realize what you're doing." The certainty in her voice made me doubt myself all over again. Was I angry? Was I jealous? Had I been rougher than I realized? More careless with my words and actions? "I would never hurt you," I whispered. "I know you don't want to," she said softly. "But wanting and doing are different things, aren't they?" She squeezed past me in the doorway, her shoulder brushing against mine, and I found myself stepping back automatically. Even that small contact felt dangerous now, loaded with the potential for misinterpretation. The morning I was expelled, I woke up with a strange sense of dread that I couldn't shake. It was a Tuesday in early May, and I had a geometry test I'd studied hard for. Callista was already gone. She had early morning choir practice, and the house felt unusually quiet. I was eating breakfast when Dad's phone rang. Principal Henderson's voice was loud enough that I could hear it from across the kitchen, even though I couldn't make out the words. Dad's face grew increasingly serious as the conversation progressed. "We'll be right there," he said finally, hanging up. "What's wrong?" I asked, but Dad was already grabbing his keys. "Get your bag. We're going to school." The drive was silent except for the radio playing softly in the background. When we pulled into the school parking lot, I saw Mom's car already there, and my stomach clenched with anxiety. Principal Henderson's office smelled like coffee and disappointment. Callista was sitting in one of the chairs across from his desk, a tissue balled up in her palm. Her left eye was swollen and discolored, the kind of bruise that would take weeks to heal properly. I stopped in the doorway, genuinely shocked. "What happened to you?" She looked up at me with that bruised eye, and I saw something flicker across her face. Was it satisfaction? But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. Sit down, Yelena Belova, Principal Henderson said, gesturing to the empty chair beside Callista. My parents flanked us like guards. Mom immediately went to Callista, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. Dad stood behind my chair, arms crossed. We have a serious problem, Principal Henderson began. Callista came to school this morning with significant facial injuries. She says you hit her during an argument last night. The words hit me like a physical blow. I didn't touch her. I wasn't even home last night. I was at Sarah's house working on our history project. Her mom can verify that. You came home around 10, Callista said quietly, her voice shaky. I heard you in the hallway. When I asked where you'd been, you got angry. Oh, that's not what happened. My voice was getting louder, more desperate. I came home, said hi to Mom and Dad, and went straight to bed. I barely saw Callista. Principal Henderson consulted a file on his desk. We've had several reports over the past few months about escalating tensions between you girls. Teachers have noticed changes in your behavior. Yelena Belova, increased aggression, difficulty with authority figures. This is insane, I said, standing up abruptly. I didn't hit anyone. I would never hit my sister. Sit down, Dad said sharply, and the coldness in his voice made me sink back into the chair. Principal Henderson leaned forward, his expression sympathetic but firm. Yelena Belova, I know this is difficult, but we have to take these allegations seriously. Combined with the previous incidents and the pattern of behavior we've observed, we have no choice but to suspend you for the remainder of the semester. The room started spinning. Previous incidents? What previous incidents? The times you've pushed Callista in the hallways, he said, reading from his file. The verbal arguments that required teacher intervention. The incident where you allegedly threw a book at her during study hall. Each accusation felt like another weight added to my chest, making it harder to breathe. None of that happened. None of it. But I could see from their faces that they'd already made up their minds. The evidence was there in Callista's bruised eye, in the careful documentation of incidents I had no memory of, in my own reputation as the difficult twin who was always causing problems. This is effective immediately, Principal Henderson continued. You'll complete your coursework remotely for the rest of the year. Your record will reflect this disciplinary action. I looked at my parents, searching for any sign of doubt, any flicker of the unconditional love I'd always assumed was there. Mom was focused entirely on Callista, stroking her hair and whispering reassurances. Dad stared at the wall above my head, his jaw set in a hard line. You don't believe me, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Nobody answered. The drive home was the longest 20 minutes of my life. When we pulled into our driveway, Dad didn't get out of the car immediately. He sat there gripping the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. I want you to pack a bag, he said finally. What? Pack your things. You're going to stay with your grandmother for a while. For how long? He turned to look at me then, and I saw something in his eyes that I'd never seen before. Not anger, not disappointment, something colder, final. Until you can figure out how to be part of this family without hurting people. Grandma Marion's duplex sat on a quiet street in East Port Valdez, where the houses were small but the yards were big and nobody bothered with manicured lawns. She met me at the door that first evening with a glass of sweet tea and no questions asked. Your room's upstairs, she said simply. Dinner's at 6. For the first week, I barely left that room except to eat and use the bathroom. I called my parents twice, but both times Mom said they needed space to heal as a family and that maybe I should use this time to think about my actions. By the third week, I stopped calling. Grandma never pushed me to talk about what had happened, but she had her ways of showing she cared. She'd leave little notes in my lunch bag when I finally started attending the local high school. She'd watch my soccer games when I made the JV team. She'd sit with me at the kitchen table while I did homework, not helping, but just being present. You know, she said one evening as I struggled with calculus. Your grandfather used to say that the truth has a long memory. Sometimes it takes a while to surface, but it always does eventually. I looked up from my textbook. What if no one wants to hear it when it does? She smiled and patted my hand. Then you tell it anyway, baby, for yourself, if for no one else. High school passed in a blur of academic focus and athletic achievements that my parents never witnessed. I made honor roll every semester, earned a partial scholarship to University of Washington Port Valdez, and captained the varsity soccer team my senior year. Grandma came to every game, cheering louder than any parent in the stands. I started writing during my junior year, just journal entries at first, then short essays about feeling displaced and misunderstood. My English teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, encouraged me to submit to literary magazines. When I won a statewide high school writing contest, the local paper ran a small article about me. I sent the clipping to my parents with a note, "Thought you might want to see this." They never responded. College was a fresh start in every sense. At University of Washington, nobody knew me as the troubled twin or the girl who'd been kicked out for violence. I was just Yelena Belova Race, journalism major with a part-time job at the campus bookstore and a growing reputation for insightful feature articles. I started a blog during my sophomore year called Invisible Injuries, essays about emotional abuse, family scapegoating, and the long process of healing from childhood trauma. I was careful never to use real names or identifying details. But I wrote honestly about the experience of being erased from your own family narrative. The response was overwhelming. Comments poured in from readers who recognized their own stories in mine. I heard from siblings who'd been pitted against each other, from children who'd been labeled as difficult while their brothers or sisters could do no wrong, from adults still trying to understand why their families had chosen sides against them. "You're not alone," became my standard response to the most heartbreaking messages. Your experience matters. Your truth matters. By my senior year, the blog had thousands of regular readers and had been featured in several online publications. I graduated summa cum laude and immediately landed a job with a Port Valdez lifestyle magazine, writing features about local personalities and human interest stories. I was building a life, slowly and carefully, like someone learning to walk again after a devastating injury. The call came on a Thursday evening in September, 3 years after graduation. I was in my small apartment near Harborview District, editing an article about local food trucks. When my phone rang, Mrs. Patterson's name appeared on the screen. "Yelena Belova, honey," she said, and I could hear the tears in her voice. "I thought you should know. Your grandmother's in the hospital." The world tilted sideways. "What happened?" "Heart attack. She's at Seton, Maine. Again. I don't think she has very long." I was in my car before Mrs. Patterson finished talking, driving through Port Valdez traffic with tears streaming down my face and my hazard lights flashing. Grandma had been my anchor, my safe harbor, the one person who'd never questioned my worth or my truth. When I arrived at the hospital, I was told that only immediate family could visit the ICU. My name wasn't on the approved list. I called my mother's cell phone, then my father's. Both calls went straight to voicemail. I spent 3 hours in that waiting room, watching other families come and go, before a nurse finally approached me with gentle eyes and devastating news. "I'm sorry, honey. She passed about an hour ago." I drove home in a fog of grief and disbelief. At my apartment, I found an envelope that had been slipped under my door. Inside was a key and a note in Grandma's handwriting. For the storage unit on Riverside, everything you need to know is in the blue box. The storage unit was small, barely bigger than a walk-in closet, but it contained treasures I never knew existed. Photo albums full of pictures of me at soccer games, graduation, college events that Grandma had somehow obtained over the years. Newspaper clippings about my achievements, carefully mounted and labeled, letters she'd written but never sent, detailing her pride in the young woman I'd become. And in the blue box, the most important discovery of all legal documents showing that Grandma had quietly left me a small piece of property outside Port Valdez, along with enough money to pay the taxes for several years. But more than that, there was a folder full of evidence she'd been collecting, screenshots of social media posts, printed emails, even a few recorded phone conversations. One recording made my blood run cold. It was Callista's voice, unmistakably, talking to someone I didn't recognize. The whole thing was my idea from the beginning. I had to get her out of the house somehow. She was starting to get too much attention. The bruises were easy to fake, and my parents believed every word because they wanted to. Yelena Belova never laid a finger on me, but nobody bothered to ask for her side of the story. Grandma had somehow recorded this conversation 3 years earlier, but she'd never used it. A note clipped to the recording explained why I was waiting for you to be strong enough to handle the truth. I think that time is now. I sat in that storage unit until the sun went down, holding the evidence of my innocence and mourning the grandmother who'd believed in me when no one else would. The magazine feature about my work was supposed to be a quiet success, a 2-page spread in Port Valdez Monthly about young voices in local media. The journalist interviewed me about my blog, my advocacy for family abuse survivors, and my upcoming book deal with a small but respected publisher. I didn't expect my parents to see it. I certainly didn't expect them to show up at my apartment on a Saturday morning, carrying a store-bought coffee cake and manila folder like we were old friends catching up. "We saw your interview," Mom said, pushing past me into my living room without waiting for an invitation. "You look so professional, so successful." Dad clapped me on the shoulder like he'd done it 1,000 times before. "We always knew you'd make something of yourself. All that drive you had as a kid, we knew it would pay off eventually." I stood in my doorway, keys still in my hand from returning from my morning run, trying to process this surreal turn of events. "You want to catch up?" "Families should stick together," Dad said, settling onto my couch like he belonged there. "We've been thinking about reaching out for a while, but we wanted to give you space to grow up. You know, find yourself." They talked about the weather, about neighbors I barely remembered, about a vacation they'd taken to Colorado as if I'd been part of the planning. Mom complimented my apartment, admired my book collection, asked about my job like a normal mother would. Not once did they mention the years of silence. Not once did they acknowledge why I'd left in the first place. "So," Dad said finally, opening the manila folder, "we didn't just come to congratulate you. We're hoping you might be able to help us out with something." The papers he spread across my coffee table were estimates from contractors, handwritten notes about foundation repairs, and a summary that made my stomach drop. Total estimated cost $28,000. "The house needs some major work," he explained. "Foundations shifting, plumbing's shot, roof needs replacing. It's more than we can handle on our own." Mom leaned forward with that smile I remembered from childhood, the one she used when she wanted something. "We figured since you're doing so well now, maybe you could help out a little. It's the least you could do. After everything we've given you over the years." "Everything you've given me," I repeated slowly. "Your education, all those soccer camps, that laptop for college." She ticked off items on her fingers like she was presenting a bill. We invested a lot in you, Yelena Belova. I looked at these people who'd raised me, who'd thrown me away at the first sign of trouble, who now sat in my living room asking for money like the past 7 years had never happened. I need you to leave, I said quietly. Dad's eyebrows shot up. Excuse me. I said I need you to leave, now. Don't be dramatic, Mom said, her voice taking on that familiar edge. We're family. Family helps each other. I stood up, walked to my front door, and opened it wide. Get out. They left, but not before Dad paused in the doorway. You know, we hoped you'd grown out of this selfishness. But I guess some things never change. After they were gone, I sat in my living room holding the folder of repair estimates and laughing until I cried. Then I opened my laptop and started writing. The blog post was titled, When Your Abusers Come Back for Money, and I wrote it in one sitting. Fueled by 7 years of suppressed anger and grief, I detailed the visit, the casual way they dismissed our history, the entitlement that had brought them to my door with their hands out. But I was careful. I didn't name names or provide specific details that could identify them. I wrote about the pattern, how abusive families often return when their scapegoats become successful, how they rewrite history to position themselves as supportive when they've actually been absent. The post went viral within hours. Comments poured in from readers sharing similar experiences, and several other bloggers shared it with their own commentary. By evening, it had been picked up by larger platforms. That's when I remembered the recording. I'd transferred it to my laptop months earlier, but had never listened to it again. Now I sat in my apartment at midnight, headphones on, hearing Callista's voice admit to fabricating everything that had destroyed my teenage years. The whole thing was my idea from the beginning. I had to get her out of the house somehow. She was starting to get too much attention. The bruises were easy to fake, and my parents believed every word because they wanted to. Yelena Belova never laid a finger on me, but nobody bothered to ask for her side of the story. The quality was clear enough, the voice unmistakably hers. Grandma had somehow recorded this during a phone conversation, though I still didn't understand how or why. I uploaded the audio file to my blog with minimal commentary. Sometimes the truth has a way of preserving itself. This recording was made 3 years after I was expelled from high school and disowned by my family for allegedly abusing my twin sister. The voice belongs to that sister. Then I closed my laptop and went to bed, knowing that by morning, everything would change. The call came from my cousin Jake at 6 a.m. Jesus, Yelena Belova, your phone's been ringing all night. Have you seen what's happening online? I hadn't. I turned off my phone before going to sleep, needing at least a few hours of peace before dealing with whatever consequences would follow. The recording had exploded across social media overnight. It had been shared thousands of times, picked up by news outlets, and spawned countless discussion threads about family abuse and false accusations. My inbox was flooded with messages from journalists, family members, strangers, and attorneys offering their services. But the message that mattered most was from Uncle Frank. Family gathering this Sunday. You should come. It's time we all heard the truth. I almost didn't go. Part of me wanted to let the recording speak for itself and move on with my life. But I realized I needed to face them, needed to see their reactions with my own eyes. The gathering was at my cousin Maria's house, a neutral location where no one could control the narrative or force anyone to leave. When I arrived, the atmosphere was tense. Conversation stopped when I walked in. Some family members nodded at me with what looked like respect. Others avoided eye contact entirely. Callista was there. Of course, seated at the kitchen table with Mom flanking her like a bodyguard. She looked older, more brittle somehow, her carefully maintained composure showing cracks around the edges. Uncle Frank had set up a small speaker system in the living room. When everyone was gathered, he stood up and cleared his throat. "Before we eat," he said, "there's something we need to address. Something that's been poisoning this family for too long." He pressed play. Callista's voice filled the room with casual cruelty. "The whole thing was my idea from the beginning. I had to get her out of the house somehow. She was starting to get too much attention." The silence that followed was deafening. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of children playing in another room, the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Callista started crying, not the careful, calculated tears I remembered from our childhood, but ugly, desperate sobs. "It was taken out of context," she said through her tears. "I was joking. I was angry about something else." But even as she spoke, you could see that no one believed her anymore. The recording was too clear, too specific, too damning. 30 years old, Aunt Carmen said quietly. "She's been carrying this lie for 17 years. Mom stood up abruptly. "This is a private family matter. It doesn't need to be discussed here." "Actually," Uncle Frank said, "I think it does. Yelena Belova was family too, and we failed her. We all failed her." One by one, family members began to speak. Some apologized. Others shared their own doubts about what had really happened. A few admitted they'd always wondered, but had been afraid to say anything. Through it all, my parents remained silent. Dad stared at his hands while Mom continued trying to shield Callista from the consequences of her own words. I didn't say much during that gathering. I didn't need to. The truth was speaking for itself, and for the first time in my adult life, people were listening. The recording changed everything and nothing. My blog gained thousands of new subscribers overnight. I received book deal offers from major publishers and speaking invitations from universities and advocacy groups. Several family members reached out with apologies and explanations, trying to rebuild bridges that had been burned years earlier. But Callista fought back. She hired a lawyer and claimed the recording had been manipulated, taken without consent, and misrepresented. She started her own blog called My Truth, where she positioned herself as the real victim, a woman whose private conversation had been illegally recorded and weaponized against her by a vindictive sister. Some people believed her. Not many, but enough to keep the controversy alive. She appeared on a local talk show, tears streaming down her face as she talked about the campaign of harassment I'd launched against her. She claimed I'd been obsessed with destroying her reputation for years, that the recording was just the latest escalation in a pattern of stalking and abuse. My parents supported her narrative publicly while remaining silent toward me. Dad gave an interview to a family friend who worked for a local newspaper, describing me as a troubled child who'd never gotten the help she needed and had now grown into a dangerous adult. The irony wasn't lost on me. Even with proof of my innocence, I was still being painted as the problem. But something had shifted in the wider family dynamic. My cousin Maria invited me to her daughter's birthday party, the first family celebration I'd attended in over a decade. Aunt Carmen called to ask if I wanted to join their book club. Uncle Frank offered to help me find a good financial advisor to manage my growing income from writing. Not everyone was ready to rebuild our relationship, but enough were that I started to feel like I had a family again, just not the one I'd been born into. The most difficult conversation came from an unexpected source, Mrs. Rodriguez, my high school English teacher. She called me one evening, 6 months after the recording went public. "I owe you an apology," she said without preamble. "I was there during those faculty meetings when we discussed your behavioral issues. I had doubts, but I didn't speak up. I should have advocated for you." "You couldn't have known," I told her. "But I could have asked better questions. I could have looked for other explanations. Teachers are supposed to protect all their students, not just the ones who fit neatly into our expectations. Her words meant more to me than any of the family apologies because she understood something the others didn't. Institutions had failed me too, not just individuals. I hadn't planned to celebrate my 30th birthday. After a lifetime of complicated birthday memories, I preferred to let the day pass quietly. But my friend Sarah, who'd become my chosen sister over the years, had other ideas. "You're having a party," she announced 2 weeks before the date. "A real party with people who love you and cake that has your name on it." The gathering was small, just 8 close friends at my apartment, but it felt perfect. We ordered too much Thai food, played board games, and told embarrassing stories about our 20s. No drama, no hidden agendas, no careful navigation of family politics. But the moment that broke me, in the best possible way, came when Sarah's 6-year-old daughter, Emma, emerged from the kitchen carrying a homemade cake. It was lopsided and covered in rainbow sprinkles, with "Happy Birthday, Yelena Belova and Emma" written in purple frosting. "Today's my half birthday," Emma explained seriously. "So we can share." I stared at that crooked cake with both our names on it and felt something inside my chest crack open. For the first time in my life, my name was on a birthday cake alongside someone who wanted it there. Not out of obligation or guilt, but out of pure, uncomplicated love. "That's the most beautiful cake I've ever seen," I told Emma, and I meant it. She beamed at me with frosting already on her fingers from sneaking tastes. Mommy helped with the spelling, but I did all the decorating myself. We cut the cake together, Emma insisting on giving me the first piece because it's more your birthday than mine. As I took that first bite of slightly too sweet frosting and uneven layers, I realized something profound. This was what family was supposed to feel like. Later, after everyone had gone home and I was cleaning up the remnants of the party, I found myself thinking about all the birthdays I'd spent alone or forgotten. The cake with only Callista's name, the corner piece of sheet cake, the years of buying myself cupcakes and lighting borrowed matches. None of it had been wasted. All of that pain, all of that loneliness had led me to this moment, surrounded by people who chose to love me, who celebrated my existence without conditions or reservations. I opened my laptop and started writing. Today I turned 30, and for the first time in my life, my name was on a birthday cake alongside someone who put it there out of love, not obligation. Her name is Emma. She's 6 years old, and she taught me something I'd been trying to learn for decades. Family isn't who you're born to. It's who chooses to show up for you again and again, especially when it's difficult. I published the post without editing it, then closed my laptop and went to bed, finally understanding what it meant to be enough. 2 years later, I'm sitting in my new office in downtown Port Valdez, putting the finishing touches on my second book. The Invisible Injuries became a bestseller, leading to speaking engagements across the country and a platform I never imagined I'd have. My second book, Chosen Family, explores how adults can build healthy relationships after surviving family trauma. The success still feels surreal sometimes. I've appeared on national talk shows, been quoted in major publications, and received thousands of letters from readers who found hope in my story. But the achievement I'm most proud of is quieter. I sleep well at night. I trust my instincts. I don't apologize for taking up space. My relationship with my extended family continues to evolve slowly. Some cousins have become close friends. Others maintain polite distance. Uncle Frank and I have coffee every few months, and he's become something of a father figure, the parent who listens without judgment and offers advice without conditions. My parents and I have had exactly 3 conversations in the past 2 years. The first was when Dad called to tell me Mom had been diagnosed with early stage breast cancer. I sent flowers to the hospital with a card that said simply, "Wishing you healing." The second was when they wanted to discuss my book before it was published, worried about how they'd be portrayed. I told them they were welcome to read it when everyone else did. The third conversation happened last month. Mom called on a Tuesday evening, her voice smaller than I remembered. "I've been reading your blog," she said, "and your book." "Okay," I said, not sure where this was going. "I need you to know that I don't think we handled things well. When you were younger, it wasn't an apology exactly, but it was acknowledgement. After 32 years, it was something. Thank you for saying that," I told her. Would you? Would you be open to having dinner sometime? Just the two of us?" I considered it for a long moment. "Maybe, but I need you to understand that I'm not the same person who left your house 17 years ago. I won't shrink myself to make others comfortable anymore." "I know," she said quietly. "I'm not the same person either. We haven't had that dinner yet, but the invitation sits between us like a door that's been opened just a crack. I might walk through it someday, or I might not. Either choice is mine to make, and that autonomy feels like its own kind of victory. Callista and I exist in separate worlds now. She moved to Dallas, married a man she met at church, and had 2 children. According to family reports, she's a devoted mother and active in her community. She never responded to my attempts at reconciliation after the book came out, and I've stopped trying. Some relationships can't be repaired, and accepting that has been its own form of healing. I think about her sometimes, though not with anger anymore, but with something closer to sadness. I wonder if she ever feels the weight of what she did. If she lies awake at night remembering the lies that shaped both our lives. I wonder if she's teaching her children to tell the truth, or if the patterns are already repeating. But mostly, I don't think about her at all. I think about the life I'm building, the people who show up for me, the work that gives my pain purpose. Emma is 8 now, and she still insists on sharing her half birthday with me every year. Last year, she made me a card that said, "Happy birthday to my bonus aunt who writes books and tells the truth." I have it framed on my desk, right next to a photo of Grandma Marion and me at my college graduation, the last picture we took together. Sometimes people ask me if I regret going public with my story, if the cost of speaking my truth was worth it. The question always surprises me because it implies I had a choice in staying silent. But silence was killing me slowly, poisoning every relationship I tried to build, making me doubt my own memories and perceptions. Speaking up didn't fix everything. It couldn't give me back my childhood or erase the years of exile, but it gave me something more valuable: the ability to trust myself. The truth, as Grandma used to say, has a long memory. Sometimes it takes decades to surface. Sometimes it requires evidence and witnesses and public platforms to be believed. But it always finds a way to be heard. If you're brave enough to keep telling it. I'm not the same girl who stood in that backyard 17 years ago, staring at a cake with someone else's name on it. I'm not waiting for permission to exist anymore, not asking for my name to be included in someone else's story. I became the woman their silence raised me to be. And it turns out, she's exactly who I was meant to become. I became the woman their silence raised me to be. And it turns out, she's exactly who I was meant to become. Here's what I learned. The truth has a long memory. It might take years, even decades to surface, but it always finds a way to be heard if you're brave enough to keep telling it. To everyone listening who's ever been made to doubt their own truth, who's been erased from their family's story, or who's had to rebuild their identity from nothing, Your experience matters. Your story matters. You matter. What's your story? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own truth? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story resonated with you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes we all need a reminder that we're not alone in this. Until next time, keep telling your truth. The world needs to hear it. Ideal.